Hi, we're going to go ahead and read Chapter 7. This chapter is titled Terry and Pat. As I walk to the docks through the gray, early morning light, I feel just like Terry Lee heading off with Pat on an adventure to the far east. Except, of course, I'm going to be looking for sponges, not a gold mine. But I don't care. I'm excited. Also, it doesn't hurt that Beans was burned up when he found out Slowpoke had hired me and not him. "Why is he taking you if he needs another hand?" Beans asked. "Maybe he needed a smart hand," I said. Slowpoke waves at me when he sees me. "Hey there, honey," he says. "You ready to work?" "You bet I am," I say. "Waves are kicking up a little. You know how to swim, right?" he asks, helping me onto the boat. "Like a fish," I lie. Slowpoke gestures to another fella who's on the deck. He's younger, maybe 18, with soft brown hair and an easy smile. "This is Ollie. He's my new first mate," Slowpoke says. "Welcome aboard, Miss Turtle," Ollie says, tipping his cap. "What happened to the old first mate?" I ask. "Got bit by a shark," Ollie says. "That happens a lot?" Slowpoke chuckles. "Only after a few rounds at Sloppy Joe's. That shark was a lovely lady named Margaret. "Shark ever bite you?" I ask. He looks away. "A long time ago." So obviously here we know that the shark they're talking about is not an actual shark. Rather, they're kind of hinting at they're falling in love with somebody else, with another woman. It's a hot day, but the combination of the wind and the salt water spraying cools off my skin. Key West disappears behind us, and the ocean spreads out like glassy blue road. The men maneuver smoothly around the boat, adjusting sails, tightening lines. They don't even need to talk to each other. They're like the sailing version of Fred Airstrait and Ginger Rogers doing a dance number. Slowpoke takes off his straw hat and puts it on my head. "It's too big." "What's this for?" I ask. "Your pretty face is gonna get burned up," he says, squinting at the sun. "It's a lot hotter than it looks." "Mama said Key West was hot, but I didn't think it would be this hot," I say. He looks at me sideways. "So, how is your mother these days?" "She's working as a housekeeper for a mean rich lady who hates kids and won't let her talk on the telephone," I say. "Besides that?" he asks. "Besides that, she's fine," I tell him. I look out at the horizon. "Say, you think we'll be attacked anytime soon?" "Attacked?" That's what always happens in Terry and the Pirates," I say. Slowpoke nods. "I've noticed that kid gets in a lot of scrapes. But I don't think we have anything to worry about." He looks across the boat. "Ollie here will beat him off." "You bet I will, Cap," Ollie says, and holds up his fists. "Just let him try and get past me." "So, where are we headed, Pat?" I ask Slowpoke. "Pat, huh?" His eyes crinkle in amusement. "I don't know. What do you think, Terry?" "How about China?" I suggest. "China's pretty far away. Might not be home for supper." "I don't mind. I had a big breakfast." I look at him closely. "You ever been to China for real?" "'Fraid not. But I've been to Cuba and the Bahamas." He touches my nose. "Your people are from Green Turtle Key. Mine too." "Are we related?" I ask. Seems like everybody here is someone else's cousin. He stares at me. "I don't know, honey." There's something about him that tugs at me. He's so kind, and of course he's got good taste. He likes the funny pages. "I wish we could go to China," I say, just like Terry and Pat. Ollie appears at Slowpoke's shoulder. "Pat's a lot more handsome than the Cap here." "I think I might need to get myself a new first mate," Slowpoke says, and he makes a face. "Just as long as it's not Beans," I say, "or else you'll have a mutiny on your hands." Ollie tosses in the anchor, and Slowpoke and I climb down into the little dinghy. Slowpoke picks up a jug of some kind of liquid and pours it onto the surface of the water. "What's that?" I ask. "Shark oil," he says. "You spread it out on the water, and when you look through the bucket, You can see better. Helps you spot the sponges. He picks up a glass-bottomed bucket and holds it onto the water, looking down intently. Then he takes a long pine pole that has a three-pronged hook on one end and sticks it in the water, hook end first. He fishes around and then drags the pole up. Stuck on the hooked end is a black sponge. Good size. It's no loggerhead, but they can't all be, Slowpoke says. I help by pointing out sponges, and Ollie and Slowpoke fish them out. After a few hours, we've got a nice pile of sponges. That's a good day's work, Ollie says, wiping the sweat off his forehead and looking at Slowpoke. What do you think, Cap? I see one more, I say. You want to try for it, Miss Turtle? Ollie asks, holding out the pole. All right, I say. I maneuver the pole, and Slowpoke smiles at me. You're a born conch, he says. I've almost snagged the sponge when I lose my footing and go tumbling over the side of the dinghy. The next thing I know, I'm underwater, and I try to take a breath, but I choke. All I can think is that Beans is going to be so happy that I'm dead because he'll get his room back. Then I feel a strong arm go around my waist and pull me up to the surface. I got you, honey, Slowpoke says, and then I'm being handed up to Ollie's arms and laid on the bottom of the dinghy. Spit it up, Miss Turtle, Ollie says, and I do. Good girl, a dripping Slowpoke, brushing the wet hair gently off my forehead. Took 10 years off my life. She went over so fast, Cap, Ollie says, his face anxious. I thought you said you could swim, like a fish, Slowpoke chides me. A dead one, I say, and I cough. Honey, Slowpoke says, shaking his head, dead fish float. We're sailing for home when we pass a slip of an island with a shack. Slowpoke turns to Ollie and says, I want to check on the cistern. Aye, aye, Cap, Ollie says, and drops anchor close to the little island. The men row the dinghy to shore. I follow Slowpoke to the shack. Does someone live here? I ask, peeking inside. It's tiny and smells like something died in it. Spongers leave their sponges here to cure sometimes. There's a cistern out back that catches rainwater that we use, too. Want to help me check on it, Terry? Sure, Pat, I say. Slowpoke lifts the lid off the big barrel, and I see a dead rat floating on the water. This is why we check it, he tells me. I hate rats, I say. He empties out the cistern and sets it up again. Then he says, Speaking of Terry and the pirates, there's something you might like to see. He leads me over to a big rock near the water's edge. There's an iron spike in it. Do you know what this is? An old spike in a rock? His voice grows low. It's a genuine pirate death trap. Pirates would shackle rivals to this rock and let them drown in the incoming tide. That spike held the iron shackles. I look down at the rock and back up at Slowpoke. You're pulling my leg, I say. You got me, he says with an admiring laugh. Not much gets past you. I'm smart, I say. But there were pirates around here a long time ago, he says. I don't believe you. It's true. See those keys? He asks, pointing at the little islands in the distance. There's hundreds of them. That's where pirates used to hide their ships and their loot. Anyone ever find any treasure? I ask. Everybody's always looking for Black Caesar's treasure, especially after Old Ropes up and disappeared. Who's Black Caesar? Who's Old Ropes? Why has everybody got such funny nicknames around here anyways? Slowpoke laughs. It's just the Key West way, Turtle. I say. He looks out at the water. Black Caesar was a ruthless pirate who buried his treasure here in the Keys. And Old Ropes? An old-time sponger. People say Old Ropes spent so much time on the water that he had webbed feet. I laugh at the image. One day, Old Ropes came back from a sponging trip. He had a drink at the bar, and the next morning, he was gone. Nobody ever heard from him again. Left his house full of furniture, food in the icebox, even left his cat. How could he leave his cat? I ask. Rumors started going around that he'd found one of Black Caesar's stashes and was living rich as a hog somewhere in South America. After that, everyone and their mother started crawling over this key looking for gold. Do you think he found treasure? I asked him. I think he found trouble. Old Ropes liked to gamble. I suspect he owed someone money and he had to get out of town fast. He looks up at the darkening sky. Speaking of which, we better start back now, or your aunt will run me out of town. How'd you get the name Slowpoke anyhow? I asked. Guess you could say I've always taken my sweet time doing things. My mother said I was late for my own birth. Just as long as you don't take your time paying me, I say, and I hold out my hand. He shakes his head and digs into his pocket.